Hi everyone and welcome to this new video on Rawlings blog YouTube channel. Recently I've received a lot of messages from people asking about things like vocabulary learning techniques. They're saying things like a lot of people have suggested ways to them that don't work for them. And for example, how do you get around learning vocabulary without using flashcards? Now the truth is that I very rarely use flashcards. I think it should be a last resort really, and actually there are a lot of other techniques that you can use to learn vocabulary which I'm going to talk you through today. So my new language which I am learning in light of the Polyglot conference which is coming up next month in Budapest is Hungarian. And it's been sort of a long time since I've picked a language and really wanted to study it and been interested in it. And so far it's going pretty well with Hungarian. Now, the course that I'm using is the Routledge Colloquial Hungarian course, which is not that expensive. It was a decision for me between using either Routledge or the Teach Yourself series, but I think now that I'm starting to prefer the Routledge books because my recent experiences with Teach Yourself have been that while they're good, I find that often they tend to oversimplify the language and try to hide things from you, and while you feel like you're making a lot more progress with them and getting through the units more quickly, you're actually learning relatively little grammar, and with a language like Hungarian that's definitely not what you need. So for those that aren't familiar with how these kind of courses work, basically they're split up into units, and in each unit there are a series of dialogues like this, and that is followed by grammar points like this, and then you get through and they have lots of exercises for you to practice everything that you're learning. So I've been doing this for about a week and a half now, and I'm just moving on to Unit 4, and I've been doing about an hour a day. That is about 15-20 minutes in the morning, half an hour to 40 minutes maximum in the afternoon, and then 15-20 minutes again in the evening just to recap everything that I've learned in the day and possibly move on to some new topics which I'll do more on the next day. So, vocabulary learning techniques. Hungarian is a completely different language to other European languages, as many of you know. It's part of the Finno-Ugric family, and it has a very little in common with other languages that I know, like German or Russian, although it does have some loan words from both because of its political history. So this is kind of a language where it's not easy to learn vocabulary, and you kind of really need to be able to have some techniques at hand to use. So the first that I'm going to talk you through today is the context technique. This is when you come across words sort of in their original format in, for example, a story or in a dialogue, and you remember them because you remember about the story. And this works particularly well with this course because there are plenty of dialogues that are quite useful. For example, okay, I'm going to play you now a little dialogue from from Unit 2, which is this one. And then I'll just talk you through how we deal with it. So basically this dialogue is teaching us left and right, a couple of colours, and a few little pieces of vocabulary around town. And what's going on is that there's these two people, John and Reka, who are looking around Budapest, and Reka is showing John, who's the foreign guest, around.
Listen to the colour terms and the expression of directions. What's on the left and what's on the right? Mi ez?
Ez egy villamos, az pedig egy busz.
A budapesti villamosok sárgák?
Igen, a régi villamosok is sárgák, és az új villamosok is sárgák.
A New York-i taxik is sárgák. Mi az?
Az a megálló. Nem a busz megálló, hanem a villamos megálló.
Itt van az egyetem?
Igen, itt van balra.
És mi van ott jobbra?
Nem tudom.
A nem tudom, hogy van angolul?
A nem tudom angolul, I don't know.
Köszönöm.
Szívesen.
So basically there's kind of four main points that we're getting from this dialogue. First of all, I mean, you can't expect to memorize everything on first go. And as a result, I mean, you'll be able to come back to the dialogue and look at things many times, and eventually you'll be comfortable with everything, whereas at the moment it just sounds a bit like a blur. So the first thing which we're finding out is the word for tram and the word for bus. Now, John says mi ez, which is what is this, and Reka says ez egy villamos, az pedig egy busz. So we know now, villamos is tram and bus is bus. Then he says, a budapesti villamosok sárgák? And she says, igen, which means yes. So he says, are trams in Budapest yellow? And she says, yes. And then he says, a New Yorki taxik sárgák. The New York taxis are yellow. Now, this is also a very easy image for us to know because we all know that the New York taxis are yellow, and that's a good way for us to remember the word for yellow, which is sárgák, or sárga in the singular. Then he says, itt van az egyetem. He says, is this here the university? And she says, igen. Itt van balra. Yes, this is on the left. And then he says, és mi van ott jobbra? And she says, nem tudom. Now, again, left and right is something which you also have to learn because it's very important in the language. So the first thing we have to remember is that first he says, is that the university? She says, yes, it's on the left. Itt van balra. So balra is left. And then he says, és mi van ott jobbra? What is on the right? So balra comes first, it's left, and jobbra is right. We remember what happens. First they see the tram, then they see the bus. Then he asks if they're yellow, and then he says that the taxis in New York are yellow. Then he says, is that the university on the left? And then he says, what's that on the right? And she says, I don't know. The second thing is visual, and I am particularly impressed with this course because it has provided a brilliant visual aid. So basically this picture, as you can all see, it has a table, and what the dialogue does, which is up here, is it describes everything that is on the table in Hungarian for you to listen to.
Listen to the following text carefully. Please note that when two singular subjects are connected with the word and, the verb is used in the singular.
Az asztal. A villa és a szalvéta balra van. A kés és a kanál jobbra van. És vajon hol van a pohár? A pohár is jobbra van. A tányér középen van. Minden nagyon szép és régi.
Okay, so again we've got the dialogue and the description which comes, the audio description. So first of all he says, a villa és a szalvéta balra van. So balra is left, remember that? And here we see it, a villa és a szalvéta balra van. Then he says, a kés és a kanál jobbra van. So here we go on the right, a kés, which is a knife, és a kanál jobbra van. Then he says, hol van a pohár? Where is the cup? And then he says, a pohár is jobbra van. The cup is also on the right. And then he says, a tányér középen van. The plate is in the middle. So we've got this simple, I'll show you the picture just in detail again. So we've got a villa és a szalvéta, and we have a kés és a kanál és a pohár és a tányér. The third technique that I'm going to talk about today is associative memory. This is where you take words that you already know and associate them with the new words that you'll know. They could sound like the words that you're learning, or maybe you could think up of some kind of sentence or context where you put them together so that you start to associate them. Basically, you're playing around so that they start to mean something to you, and so that the new words that you're learning start to have meaning rather than just being like sounds. So for example, the Hungarian word for family is család, which is spelled as you can see on the screen. Now, I think that this looks and sounds a lot like the English word salad. So I imagine, for example, a big Hungarian family sitting around a bowl of salad. As you learn more languages, this is how it becomes easier to learn vocabulary, because gradually what you start to be able to do is rely on these other languages as well. So for example, the Hungarian word for table is asztal, which sounds a lot like the Russian word stol. And the Hungarian word for window is ablak, which to me sounds like the Russian word oblaka, which means cloud. So for example, I can see a picture of a window with a cloud in it. This is obviously a very personal way of learning vocabulary, and everyone's experiences of it will be different, and I think it's important that you try to find things that have the most meaning for you, but this is just one of the many ways that you can learn vocabulary and make things easier without having to resort to the evil flashcards. So I've talked about a couple of things today. Thank you very much for watching. Please, as always, leave comments, subscribe, and don't forget to check out my blog, and you'll find a link to that in the description. So thanks again, and bye-bye. Sziasztok!